Okay, Mark, over the years, I've heard a lot of great stories that you've told people, but I think how you got started with the Raiders as an intern, if you can share that.
Well, first, I think you should just take a seat. And get
I would think so.
I expected to come up here and set a teleprompter up here, Caprice and Harina. I don't know if you're still out here. I just want to tell you how impressed I was. Public speaking is most people's #1 fear. And you guys did a really remarkable job of telling your story. So if that's the type of leader that this club is producing, I think everyone should come away pretty inspired. Real briefly, I started my career as an intern as a 21-year-old when the team was still in Los Angeles. So it's a part of who I am. I've been there 27 years. I've been a part of a lot of events like this. I've been a part of a lot of good things that the Raiders have been able to touch, but worked my way up through the organization, and that's really the type of organization we have. We have a lot of staff here that people get a chance to meet that have similar stories and similar paths, starting at a very entry-level position and working their way up.
The cornerstone of the Raiders and community service. Tell us about that.
It's certainly been something the Davis family has always stressed to all of us. They don't necessarily do it for notoriety or recognition. They don't like to pat themselves on the back. They don't really like any attention. So sometimes it's up to us to force them to get that attention because it raises awareness and it raises the support for the charities that are involved. But the Davis family has always made it a pillar of what they're about, starting with Mr. and Mrs. and spreading down to Mark.
I understand that we have the Raiders and the Raiders Foundation. Would you mind explaining the difference and exactly what does the Raiders Foundation do?
That's a good question. They work very closely together. The Raider Foundation is a 501c3. It has a certain mission statement and 3 pillars that are on the cards that you see for military support, youth development, and growing the game of football. And they're written broadly so that we can touch a lot of different organizations, but they're also specific enough that everybody knows where the focus is. So for the 501c3, it gives us the ability to partner with people like Verizon and other individuals, and that money all goes to charity, to the specific charities that we're supporting. The Raiders themselves obviously support a wide range of community programs and other philanthropic engagement, but the foundation has these specific causes that we choose to support.
Mark, a lot of people have come up to me over the last 6 months and want to know why the Raider Foundation is already here. The team won't be here for another 1.5 years. Why are you on the ground so early?
Well, it ties to the Davis mantra and what the organization's about. We got approval to relocate to Las Vegas in late March of 2017. And the first person on the ground was here about 3 months later. She's in the audience. She likes when I call her out. Erin Wright, if you'd stand up for a second, our Vice President of Community Relations. We call her our LVOG because she was the first person on the ground here. But she's done a tremendous job meeting everyone in the community and educating the organization on where they need the most support. And that was important. And I think that's pretty telling that she's the first person that was here.
Being a part of the Boys and Girls Club, I love the organization. Why did the foundation choose to help the Boys and Girls Club this morning?
I think I'm looking at the reason right here. We've worked with Boys and Girls Club throughout our history. When we were in Los Angeles, when we were in Oakland the first time, when we moved back, we've always done events with the Boys and Girls Club. You're going to hear from Hall of Famer Mike Haynes later about his story and what these clubs meant to him, but we've seen the impact that they have. We know what they do in areas of the community that really need it, and it certainly ties with what we're about.
Mark, tell us what the Las Vegas community can look forward to in the coming months and the next year, in the immediate future.
Well, obviously, I think everybody sees the stadium coming out of the ground, which is exciting. It's something for the community to be really proud of. There's only 30 markets in the world that have NFL teams, and the stadium project is a legacy for not only the team, but for the community. It's something to be really proud of. But from a community standpoint, you've seen some of our staff, our alumni, our Raiderettes, that have been at a number of events, and you'll continue to see that. And we've gotten some of our current players to come out to some events here over the last few months. And once we get in this off season, you'll see them on the ground. When we get here full time in 2020, I think is when you'll really see the full blitz of what the organization can do in the community. And our players are looking forward to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Mark Bidet for everything. I get an opportunity to interview a lot of Raiders and a lot of Raider Hall of Famers. Our next guest is probably one of the most respected men that I've ever met. Not just football, what he's done in the community, the gentleman Raider, the impact that he has had from Canton, Ohio to Arizona, throughout Arizona State, to back to his high school, and the impact that he is going to have on this community and this organization going forward. He was the 1976 Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was a two-time first-team All-Pro, a nine-time Pro Bowler, a Hall of Famer. Please welcome the great Mike Haynes. All right, Mike, we want to begin with the early years.
Oh, boy.
The early years of middle school and high school. Talk about mentorship, how it all began for you when you decided you had a passion for not only life, but sports.
Well, I found out probably like most kids that they could play sports, you know, in PE. You know, we want to play dodgeball and nobody can get me out. I'm in the circle, nobody can get me out. So that was my first clue. And I continued to excel at sports. Growing up in Los Angeles, like Mark did, I guess, I was very fortunate. We had a lot of pro teams, and all the pro teams were committed to the community and working with the kids. And when you have one of your Lakers stars say, "What's your grade point average?" or "How you doing in school?" instead of, "Hey, can you dunk? Can you do a crossover dribble?" You know, that kind of stuff. They're really interested in me as a person, not me as an athlete. And I remember those conversations even to this day. So the Boys and Girls Clubs were also in my life. Like maybe the other kids that are going to this club. My parents worked 9 to 5, I think one of the kids said. Exactly the same type of thing. But in the summertime, there's no place for us to go. And so that's where we used to go, the Boys and Girls Club. I learned to swim at the Boys and Girls Club. I first started doing arts and crafts at the Boys and Girls Club. I love sports, and I found out that I love sports at the Boys and Girls Club, playing flag football and things like that. So for me, it was really great. My sports really started in high school, not when I was a youth. I didn't play youth football. My mom thought it was too dangerous. A lot of moms think that, right? Okay.
But Mike, 07-1, your senior year.
Oh gosh, you had to bring that up.
They end up naming the field after you later on in life. How did you get through that time when you weren't winning, but you were becoming a leader?
Well, it's not something I talk about too often, my 07-1 year. But I was the quarterback in high school of our football team, and we went 07-1. And the way I became the quarterback was I was really a receiver. I ran for a pass, the ball went over my head, and I ran, got the ball, and I tossed it back. I threw a better pass than the quarterback did. And they said, "Hey, get over here in this line, you're a quarterback." And so my senior year, I played quarterback, and we didn't win any games. It's unfortunate. I think we really had the best team in the city, but our coaches didn't call the right plays.
So college and ASU, how did Frank Kush convince you to come all the way to Tempe, Arizona? If you hadn't gone to Arizona State to play football, what would you have done instead? Talk about your last year in Arizona, or in ASU, and the success you all had in 1975.
Well, I was recruited to Arizona State, and I really, to be honest with you, I was kind of a weird kid. I really didn't have the desire to go to college. When I was your age, I just wanted to graduate high school and get a job. You know, I wanted to get out of my mom's hair and stop being a problem for her. But I got lucky and I played this all-star game. And after this all-star game, all these, you're saying like, how could you get a scholarship to college? Well, when you're 07-1, not a lot of schools come looking for you, okay? And so I got lucky to play in that all-star game, and I played really well in that all-star game. And afterwards, a lot of colleges were asking me to come play at their school. I was so naive. They say, "What's your GPA?" And I'd say, "I don't know." I said, what's a B average? They said 3.0. I said, "Well, I'm probably that." And they said, "Are you in the upper half of your graduating class?" And I thought about all the yahoos in my class. And I said, "I'm sure I'm in the upper half of my graduating class." Well, it turns out I was wrong on both cases. I wasn't in the upper half, and I had a 2.5 grade point average. And so I was a little surprised, and then they said, hey, have you taken the SAT or the ACT? Have you taken those yet? Okay, how'd you do?
Good, pretty
Okay.
good.
And because I hadn't taken those, I couldn't really get into any of the schools. And so my parents didn't raise me that way, but I got really lucky. The high school I went to was a college prep school, and it was a great academic school. So just by sitting in the classes and doing my homework, I did okay. And so I got into Arizona State, but I actually got in there that first year on probation, because they're not sure I was college material. Well, when I got into college, that was really the first time I really studied. Because before I just sit in front of the class, take notes, do a little bit of the work, and then take the test. Hey, my parents just cared if I graduated from high school. They didn't care if I went to college, all right? So I was doing okay. Well, all that changed. In college, I made the Dean's List as a freshman. So I did okay. So I was all right for college, and things kind of have worked out for me. Coach Cush was probably the biggest inspiration in my life. When I think back on it, as a football player, like I said, I had no desire to play pro football. I didn't know I was going to go play college football even. I learned to tackle in college. And Coach Cush was always on me, and I realized it was because he loved me. Even now, as I think about it right now, he just passed away recently, I get choked up. At the time, I hated him. You know, he said, he's just always on me. Like, Mike, you're late. Mike, you're this. Why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And I couldn't do anything right. And then later I realized my parents were working. They should have been doing that to me. They should have been having that kind of, impact on me. So I got at the Boys and Girls Club because they were always on me too. But Coach Cush is had the greatest impact on my life. And we won a lot of games in college. My senior year, we were undefeated. I was a team captain. I learned about leadership through sports and football. I learned about teamwork. I realized I can't win by myself. I might be the greatest athlete in the world, but if I don't have other athletes around me that we really work well together, we're not going to ever win anything. And so I learned that as a freshman, and I learned that from Coach Cush. My first, I'll be quick because I know people want to get to work and stuff. My first week at Arizona State, the guys run a mile for conditioning. And we had a quarterback there named Danny White, who later played for the Dallas Cowboys, was a big star there. Most accurate passer in Cowboy history, I think. Coach Cush said, last year, Danny White ran the mile in 4-something, like 4:40 or something like that. And I said, good for Danny White. And he said, who said that? And then the crowd just parted like a sea. And there was me and there was Coach Cush. And he said, what's your name, son? I said, Mike Haynes. He said, you better make your mile, son. You better make it. And that's where it started with me and Coach Cush, right there. That was the first thing. The biggest honor I had was my senior year when Coach Cush later said, Mike has been an inspiration to the whole team, and Mike was such a great role model for the other guys and all that. And this was after me feeling horrible, and I was gonna stand up and say, I've had the worst experience of my life, But I couldn't say anything after that. And then later we became good friends, and as I got older, I realized the real impact that he had on my life, and what sometimes you guys might see somebody, you think he's a bully, he's always too tough, or she's always too tough on you, and then later you realize it's because they love you so much, and that's really what.
Let's go to the NFL journey. Top pick, number 5 overall. It's the New England Patriots. How'd you hear that you were drafted?
Oh gosh, different today than it was in my years. So my phone rang, I was laying in bed asleep. And the phone rang, they said, Mike, this is Pat Horn, the PR man for the New England Patriots. Hold for Coach Fairbanks. So I said, okay. So I put the phone and said,
Hey, Reg, it's the Patriots. I just got drafted in the first round.
Unreal.
no family around. My brother's asleep in the other room. Reggie was my brother. and that's the way it was. Where today, they would have flown me to New York, like all the guys, the top 10 or 12 guys they think are going to get drafted, they fly them to New York, they stay in the Waldorf Astoria, they wine and dine them for a week, and then they, do a lot of interviews. It was a completely different time. I think I would much rather today's approach than my time.
Now, the 1982 season, I want to talk about for a second Mr. Al Davis, who was one of the great deal makers in the history of professional sports. You're having a great career with the Patriots, and we just didn't see Mike trades back in the day like that, to go from one team to a team that was right on the doorstep of doing great things. Walk us through that and how that came about.
Well, does everybody know what free agency is? When your contract is up, you're a free agent. You get to negotiate with the other teams. Well, in my era, they didn't have free agency. So when your contract was up, you had to try and negotiate with that team. And then if you can't come to terms with that team, you can't get traded. So I said, look, I do not want to be here anymore. This is crazy. I'm in a small market town. I should be able to make as much money as I possibly can in my career, because every year you don't know if that's your last year or not. And they said, okay, we'll try to trade you. Well, the trading deadline elapsed. But before it elapsed, the day before it elapsed, Al Davis called me and said, hey, Mike, and the season had already started, by the way. This had already played, 6, 7 games. And he said, Mike, what do you think of the Raiders? And I said, would you play for the Raiders? And for me, the Raiders are in LA. That's where I grew up. That was going home for me. I said, absolutely. I said, absolutely, Mr. Davis, I'd love to. He says, all right. And he hung up the phone. So then the next day, the trading deadline elapsed. And the Patriots called me and they said, Mike, we were talking to the Raiders, but the trading deadline elapsed and we didn't have a deal. I'm really sorry. And I was sorry too, because I thought my NFL career just ended, because there's no way I'm going to play for what they're offering because they're in a small market town. I just thought the system was wrong. A few minutes later, Al Davis calls and says, Mike, you're a Raider. And I said, I just got off the phone with Pat Sullivan. He said you guys didn't work out a deal. I can't tell you what he said after that. But he hung up the phone. And so I called my attorney. He said, next day, get on an airplane, fly out to Los Angeles. So I did. We signed a contract with the Raiders, which, as I said before, wasn't the way you did business in those days. And so then the league came in and said, that contract is null and void. And so I had to sue. So I sued the National Football League. And when we went to court, the judge said, why are you in my court? And the Players Association, which was my side, saying, Your Honor, Mr. Hayes played out his contract. He should be able to negotiate with the other teams and do the best he can for his family. The league side saying, Your Honor, this case doesn't belong in your courtroom. We have an arbitration system that's designed to deal with these kinds of issues, and we don't want to take up the court's time. And the judge said, well, I think this might be an interesting case. So gentlemen, look at your calendars and what are you doing in February, And he came up with the date. And as soon as he came up with that date, I felt really bad. I thought, I'm gonna miss the whole season. I can't believe it. I gotta wait till February? So I didn't know how attorneys really get along. If there's any attorneys in here, I'm sorry, guys. But we walked right out of the courtroom, and then these two guys who in the courtroom were against each other, outside the courtroom, they were complimenting each other, like, that was pretty good what you said about this, and that was what you said about that. Yeah, but your comeback was this on that. And then they both looked at me and said, Mike, it'll be a cold day in hell before we open our books to show that we don't have money, that we're not making enough money to pay a player. I said, so we're gonna let you go to the Raiders and we'll work out the draft choices later. And so technically, by that deal, I'm the first free agent.
So you get to come home and play in front of your hometown. How's that feeling?
Well, nothing better than playing in front of your hometown. And so I'm curious, are there any guys on the Raiders now from Las Vegas that went to high school in Las Vegas? Because, you know, there's some schools here right here pretty good. So I'm sure it's just a matter of time before one of the kids who plays youth football and high school football here in Las Vegas will play on the Raiders. And that's the feeling I had, you know, growing up in LA and playing on a pro football team. So it was great.
Talk about your first home game in LA playing for the Raiders.
It was expensive. I had to buy so many tickets. I don't remember who we played the first home game that I played on the Raiders. The first game I actually played in, I know was in Buffalo against the Buffalo Bills, and I came off the bench and played. But we had a great team. I don't know if anybody remembers that team, but that team was maybe one of the best of all time, one of the best defenses of all time for sure. And we had a young defensive back named Ted Watts. He was a first-round draft pick out of Texas Tech, was it? And at the end of the game, all the games, everybody would pick on Ted Watts. And so Al Davis thought getting me, Pro Bowler, that it would make a difference, and it did. So then we had all these great number ones and number Lester Hayes, Ted Watts, Mike Davis, Van McElroy, and myself, Otis McKinney, James Davis. All those guys in that secondary, they could have played on anybody's secondary. There was nobody that was lucky to be there. They were all, worthy of being there. And we had a great team, and it was a lot of fun. And so after every game, I saw my mom, I saw my aunts and my uncles and my cousins and the guys I went to high school with and the girls I used to date and all that stuff. It was crazy.
Mike, what made the trade so incredible is you come in and then this Super Bowl run, one of the great Super Bowl teams of all time, let alone in Raider history. What was that feeling like after you were talking about New England, the small market, court, and then to be there with the Lombardi Trophy?
Well, there was just so many things about the Raiders. Let me just say, they were the winningest team in all of pro sports. That's better than the Lakers, better than the Celtics, better than the Dodgers, better than the Red Sox, better than the Yankees. They were the most winning team in all of pro sports. I felt like I was honored to be there. So lucky. And Mr. Davis, I was also lucky there that he really understood football. The owner of the Patriots didn't understand football. He would come in and say different things that would just tear our team apart, unknowing that he did it. Mr. Davis, just the opposite. He knew everything about football. I remember one day in practice, Marcus ran a route, and as he's going back to the huddle, Mr. Davis said, "What was that?" He goes, "What?" He goes, "You're supposed to go this way." He goes, "Oh, they changed the route." He even knew they changed the route. And then he looked at the coach and said, "I don't know about that play," because he was so knowledgeable about the sport and about the guys. I really felt really blessed to have played for him and for those Raiders that I played with. I was really lucky to be in that situation.
When did you start to think about life after football?
It's funny. That's a good question. I think I thought about it all the time. And I used to have a job working at the NFL. I was vice president of player and employee development for 7 or 8 years. And so my job was to get guys to think about that very thing. What are you going to do afterwards? Like I said, I didn't get to come to New York, but when I was working at the league office, guys did come to New York. And so they'd come in, I'd shake their hands and go, "Hey, welcome to New York. What are you going to do next after football?" This guy hasn't even been to training camp yet. He has no idea. And he goes, "Man, I haven't even been in camp yet." I said, "Well, you need to start thinking about it now, because the average career was only like 2.5, 3 years. So it's a big, big deal." And so for me, I had the luck of having a locker next to a guy named George Webster. And he was in my college coach's office. They had a poster of him. And underneath it said, "Greatest college player of all time." And so when I went to the Patriots, he was on that team. I was like, "Oh my God, it's George Webster. My locker's right next to George Webster." I came in one day, and his locker was cleaned out. And I said, hey, what happened to George? They said, oh, they got him last night. That's code for he got waived or he got cut. He's no longer on the team. I said, if they can do that to George Webster, the greatest college player of all time, they can surely do that to me. So I went back to college. When I first finished and joined the NFL, I didn't have my degree. I thought, hey, I made it into the NFL. I don't need this degree. Well, after I saw that, I realized I did need it. So when you're great, you know how they treated the greatest college player of all time? In the papers, in the transaction section, it just said waived, LB for linebacker, and his name. That's it. No press conference, no goodbyes, nothing big, just he's gone. So I went back to school and got my degree in finance, and I started working every year in the off season. I started a place called State Street Management. It was a big money management firm back in Boston. I worked every off season after that. And I got involved with a lot of organizations like this as well. I started giving back. The Patriots had community efforts as well. The Raiders had it too, and that's where I had the most fun because I was one of the communities that I knew and grew up in those communities, going to those communities.
Mike, the youth is here. Please give them a message as we wrap this up, as they go about their future.
Do all you kids know what a defensive back is? Or maybe even the adults, I'm not sure. Well, as a defensive back, you don't want to get beat. Especially you don't want to get beat deep. So my message is, you're going to get beat, and you're going to get beat deep. One player, a Hall of Fame player, that really put this in words for me better than anybody else was Willie Brown, Hall of Famer Willie Brown. When I joined the Raiders, he said, I heard him tell one of the other defensive backs, hey, when you get beat, don't stay beat. Don't let that define you. That's not the end of it. You gotta get unbeat. And so that's the message really. Like, you know, if you understand what that really means is things are gonna happen in your life. And when they happen, you gotta find a way to get unbeat. You gotta find another path. You might have to find another mentor, or you might have to find a mentor for the first time. But you're gonna live a long time. So I don't care how old, even the oldest person in this room is not too old to go back to school. I'm gonna live to be 125. I just turned 65. So I got 60 more years. So if that's my goal, then I can achieve almost anything, right? I can be a poor reader, and I can take some time to become a great reader. Am I right? I can be bad at math, and I can take time, get some help, and become really good at math. So that's really my message to everybody, not just to the kids, but it's to adults as well. You maybe somebody always envisioned doing what JT does right now. And they go, oh man, but I'm in my 40s or I'm in my 50s. You're still not too old. You can still do what JT does. You know, you can still be a person that is in the lives of people, emceeing programs and doing positive things. So that's really it. If you get beat, don't stay beat. That's my message.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Hayes.